In 2017, some of you know my family and I went on an RV trip cross country. And my probably favorite place that we went on our trip was Utah, and just beautiful state. We hit 3 national parks while we were there, and one of them was Arches National Park. And we weren't there for long. We kind of arrived in the early afternoon and left before the sunset. As I recall, Zoe wasn't feeling well, and so she wanted to take a nap in the RV. And so Maddie is my little hiking buddy, and so Maddie and I decided that we would go to Delicate Arch. If you've never been there, you've probably seen Delicate Arch. It's probably one of the most iconic pieces of the national park repertoire. And I opened up the guidebook that had the map, and from the parking lot where we were, Delicate Arch was only about this far away. I have several hiking stories that begin just like this story. And so Maddie and I said, we're gonna hike the whole way. We're gonna go see Delicate Arch. It was somewhere between 105 and 110 degrees. As you can tell from the picture, there was barely a cloud in the sky. The sun was relentless. And we thought, again, it was only this far, so we each brought a bottle of water. It really wasn't enough. And this is one of our family's favorite pictures. You can't quite see her face, but her face is doing this. It's, preteen wilt. And you can see there that there is no shelter, no shade whatsoever. I mean, it's a completely exposed hike the whole way, just sun beating relentlessly on us. At least to Delicate Arch, it's mostly uphill. And I kept saying, Maddie, it's around the corner, and we get to the corner and it's around the next corner. Don't worry, we're almost there. But we did make it to Delicate Arch. When I say there was no shelter or shade, that's not quite true. There were, I think, 3 in the whole 3 miles from one place to another. 3 little desert trees, little gnarly trees. And underneath those 3 little gnarly trees were about 10 to 15 people huddled. And when we saw the little gnarly trees with the 10 to 15 people huddled, we too went over and joined them and huddled under the tree. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience, you could feel the shade. I mean, it was still probably 102 under there, but it was just a little respite. And then we'd look at each other like, ready to go? Yeah, I'm ready to go. And we'd continue off until the next little gnarly tree that we could stand under. It was kind of funny to see these little clumps of people under these gnarly trees in this wide open area. But there was a little shade, a little relief, a little shelter, and we were more than happy to take it. So our gospel lesson today comes as towards the end of Jesus' earthly ministry. Jesus is approached by some Pharisees, and the Pharisees warn him that King Herod, the Roman-installed leader of Judea, wants to kill him, which is true. We're not quite sure if these are the friendly Pharisees who are sincere in their worry for Jesus, or whether they were insincere, but it really doesn't matter, because Jesus responds to them basically, listen, I'm going to do what I need to do. I have demons to cast out, I have people to heal, I have people to teach, I got things to do. I'm going to do what I need to do. Herod's going to do what Herod's going to do. It's sort of words of defiance, also sort of words that echo one of the themes through the lessons today of not being afraid. Jesus is not afraid. Herod's going to do what he needs to do. Jesus is going to do what he needs to do. And then Jesus flips the tables. They're worried about him, and then he turns around and says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it, how often have I desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings. Kind of beautiful words. You've probably heard me say this before. The Bible is replete with metaphors. It would make seminary education a lot easier if the Bible just gave us the definition of God, what God is like, who he is, and just plain English. But the scriptures don't do that. They say God is like a rock. God is like a mighty fortress. God is like a lion. God is like a shepherd who has sheep. God is like a father who has children. God is like a king who has subjects. Some of you are joining us on Wednesday nights as we look at one of the more challenging metaphors for us in the Bible, which is slave and master. And here we have another metaphor. A mother hen gathering under her brood. So as I talk about these various metaphors, I always like to say you can't absolutize any one of them, which is why there are so many, right? It's sort of like a diamond that you just keep turning and looking at the different facets, and you learn a little bit from God as Father, and a little bit from God as King, and a little bit from God as Mighty Fortress, and a little bit from God as Mother Hen. So some of the metaphors for me personally are easier to get than others. A mighty fortress, I don't happen to live in a fortress, so I have to read up on that. Well, what would that have been like to live in a mighty fortress? I'm not a shepherd. I've never really hung out with sheep, so I have to read what that's like. Maybe 20 years ago, there was a book by a literal shepherd who wrote a book on the 23rd Psalm to help us see the psalm through the eyes of a shepherd, because none of us here are shepherds. But my brothers and sisters in Christ, I do have hens. And so over these last 3 years of having hens, I've got to learn some things about hens. Hens, for those of you whose only interaction with chickens is grilled on a Caesar salad, let me fill in the blanks a little bit. Hens are lovely, right? Dawn and Chuck also have hens. They're lovely. They're beautiful. They each have their own personality. They each, at least we've noticed, they each have a different run. They have a different gait. Out of the corner of our eyes, before we even look at their feathers, we know who's running just by how they run. Oh, that's Elsie. Oh, that's Bunny. They are curious creatures. Some of them are very, very motivated by treats like oats and mealworms. And some of them are only very motivated by treats and mealworms. It kind of goes from very to very, very. That's the gradation there. When I open our coop, if it's in the daytime, the chickens want out. They're like, let us out. We want to go pick for weeds and bugs around, unless they're in their brooding box. If I open up the coop and they're in there either having just laid an egg, or they're about to lay an egg, or they're just laying on the eggs, they will not get out of that brooding box. If they're laying on the eggs that I've come to collect, I need to close the coop, walk away, and come back later because that hen will only get off those eggs when she is good and ready. Yes? So, what does it mean for Jesus to call himself like a mother hen with her brood of chicks? It's an image of protection. It's an image of shelter. It links up with some of the other metaphors of the scriptures that talk about God as our shelter, that talk about us resting under the shadow of God's wings. Just like Maddie and I huddled under those little gnarly trees in the hot desert, the chicks got to shelter under the wings of their mother, who was there to protect them and to shade them. It's interesting to me that when Jesus says this, he doesn't say rooster. We had a rooster for a short period of time before we, so did the Nils, before we knew that it was a rooster, and then we knew that our neighbors would kill us if we had a cockle-doing rooster. So we had to go off and live at another farm. But roosters are fiercely protective. If there is a predator, a fox, or a hawk, roosters will go and actively go and try and chase the predator away. The hen lays herself on top of her brood, as if to say, if you want my chicks, you are going to have to go through me. That is what Jesus says about us. Jesus is our shelter, our shade, our protection. And if something is going to get to us, it's going to first need to go through him. We, in this equation, that's us, the cute little fluffy ones, which I think is also kind of sweet. This maternal image of protection and cover. If you've ever been to a Jewish wedding, up at the front where the couple are standing, there's a structure usually erected over the couple. Anybody know what that's called? A chuppah. Chuppah, yes. That is part of the symbolism of the chuppah are the wings of God, the shelter of God, putting God's self over his people who have come to be married in front of him. It's a symbolic shelter that all of God's children are afforded. I mean, that's a physical chuppah, but there is a chuppah over us here. There is a chuppah over each one of you, here and wherever you go next and wherever you go after that. But here's where this lesson takes one more turn. Because Jesus says, how often I have desired to gather your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. Oh. I mean, why would we not be willing? Why, if we're the little chick, why would we not be willing to rest under the shade and protection of our God? And I can only think that the reason would be is that we think we got it. I will muster up the strength and the power within myself, and I'll handle it. When God simply invites us to rest under the protection and the care and the grace and the mercy that is already ours. Maddie and I didn't need to be convinced to go run under that little gnarly tree in the desert. We were quite willing. We were willing. And part of what I think the fullness of this passage is trying to say to us is it's an invitation for us to also be willing. For us to be willing to set aside our reliance solely on ourselves and to put ourselves under the shadow of God's wing. There are many different ways to pray, and sometimes we use words, sometimes we have a prayer book or an iPhone, that has the prayers in it, well-worn prayers that were written by someone else, sometimes a long time ago, and that's lovely. Sometimes we open up the book of Psalms and we can pray those. Sometimes we can just pray extemporaneously and talk to God, who is our Father and our friend, and who is crazy about us. But sometimes you don't have to use words. Whenever I talk about prayer or teach about prayer, one of the common things I hear is from people is, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to say it. I'm really bad with that. And so you can pray without words. And this week, I want to invite you, and maybe just now, even before we stand up to say the Nicene Creed, I just want you to just close your eyes and be aware of the presence of God that is already with you, that is stretched out over you like a canopy, like a little gnarly tree, like a chuppah, like the wings of a mother hen, who is with you and cares for you and will let nothing get to you without going through him first. Amen.